Hello everyone and welcome to another video. The year is 2024. After a few 60th anniversary specials aired the previous year, it's finally time to truly begin a new era for the show. Ncuti Gatwa takes over the parts of the Doctor from David Tennant, who had come back to the role for the aforementioned 60th specials. The reason why Tennant had come back was because showrunner Russell T Davies knew how much he and Catherine Tate wanted to return to the show, and he also knew how unfair it would be to have Ncuti's first year during such a big anniversary year. It would also give Ncuti some more time to work on both the final season of Netflix series Sex Education and the Barbie film. But eventually, filming would begin on Ncuti's first series. It would start with the Doctorless 73 Yards and Dot and Bubble episodes in late December 2022 to early January 2023, and would then end with the two-part series finale, The Legends of Ruby Sunday / Empire of Death. The series, known officially as Season 1, but also called Series 14 or Season 40 among fans, would then go on to air from the 11th of May to the 22nd of June 2024, and there would be a Christmas special, The Church on Ruby Road, that would air a few months earlier on the 25th December 2023. Reception to this season would be fairly mixed among the show's fans, but it would still usher in a new start for the show, with it now being distributed to a much wider and more international audience on Disney+. But what if things had gone differently? What if, in an alternate timeline, the season hadn't have been such a fresh start for the show? What if, instead of the 15th Doctor lead-in, the 14th had? What if David Tennant had stayed for Season 1 / Series 14? Now, this scenario is another one that isn't really based in any sort of reality. I merely wanted to continue my series of what ifs, imagining each Doctor staying on for another year. And so, here we are. But how exactly would this alternate timeline come about? Well, here's my best attempt at it. I think due to Ncuti's busy schedule at the time of filming, perhaps Russell and co decide to give him even more time to concentrate on his other projects, and to have David Tennant stay on for Season 1. Tennant's schedule at the time of filming would actually be pretty free, from what little I could find online anyway. Now, I know this might not make that much sense, as obviously they didn't decide to do this in our timeline, and if they were that concerned about Ncuti's availability, then why would they cast him in the first place? But let's just go with it for the sake of this scenario. So now we come to the matter of 14's supposed happy ending with Donna and her family at the end of the giggle. Obviously this would no longer happen in this scenario. There would need to be a pretty good reason why 14 would continue travelling in his TARDIS. I think what would have most likely happened would be that either Donna or a member of her family dies during the course of the giggle. If it was Donna, then it would probably be more or less the same situation as what I had detailed in my Jodie 60th specials What If. Donna would regain her memory of the Doctor in the Star Beast, but at the cost of her life. She would manage to hang on to life for a while, but would be practically already at death's door. 14 would spend the rest of the 60th specials travelling through time and space, trying to find something that might save his best friend. Perhaps Donna's daughter Rose would join him, as she'd want to do whatever she could to save her mum. But obviously Donna would still die, with 14 and Rose either not finding anything or not getting back in time to save her. But since I've already used that idea in a past video, let's try something new. Let's say that during the riots in the Giggle, Donna's family come looking for her and 14. They get caught up in all the disorder, and Rose is accidentally killed. I don't mean to offend anyone with this, by the way, I just think it would make sense for a member of Donna's family to die, as it would have to be something pretty traumatic to prevent 14 from settling down with Donna and her family. 14 would blame himself for Rose's death, even though Donna and Sean would try to reassure him that it wasn't his fault. They would tell him that they weren't angry with him about it, as it was the toy maker's fault for causing the rioting through the Giggle in the first place. Sylvia would be a bit more annoyed with the Doctor, but even she would eventually admit that it wasn't really his fault. She would say to the Doctor, though, that he brought death and misery to everyone he met, in a moment of anger before she realised that it wasn't his fault. But the Doctor would see how upset Sean, Donna and Sylvia were and would hurry off, not wanting to stick around to be reminded of what he felt was his fault. He would break down inside the TARDIS with another tragic event now hanging on his shoulders. The bi-generation would also have to not happen so that this scenario can make sense. So we'll reuse my game of chess idea from the aforementioned Jodie's 60th What If video. That being that the Doctor and co all get turned into chess pieces by the toy maker, with him then doing the same to himself as well as some other old enemies of the Doctor's, such as Daleks, Cybermen, Ice Warriors and Sontarans. The Doctor's side would obviously win, with the toy maker then being defeated and still forced into his box. And after all of this is when Sean would run up to tell Donna and the Doctor about Rose's death, just as they're celebrating the toy maker's defeat. We then come to the church on Ruby Road, which will have to be fairly different in some ways to what we got in our timeline. Ruby wouldn't first meet the Doctor in a club. She'd probably meet him for the first time on the rooftop, when she climbs onto the ladder leading to the Goblins' ship. In order to make this work, the episode would probably be best off focusing more on Ruby and her family and friends for the first part of its runtime, so we don't even see anything of the Doctor until that rooftop scene. I know Russell wrote that club scene in so as to pay tribute to how he first met his late husband, but I don't think it would make much sense for 14 to be dancing like 15 did, given that he would be in a pretty dour and depressed mood. 14 and Ruby would then find themselves on the Goblin ship, with the Doctor still using his intelligent gloves on the ladder. The Goblin son would still be in the episode, although 14 would be much more reluctant to join in. Ruby would have to convince him to do so that they have enough time to figure out where the Master Knot is and escape. But the rest of the episode would be more or less the same. 14 would probably get even more angry and vengeful when the Goblins go back in time to erase Ruby from the timeline, but the Goblins would still be defeated in the same way. Ruby would still decide to travel with the Doctor, with her perhaps seeing how emotionally wrecked 14 is, and thinking that he needed someone to help cheer him up. Space Babies would play out mostly the same as it did for us, but I could imagine it being a bit less goofy, so as to reflect 14's less positive mood and behaviour, and also I could imagine 14 being much more reluctant to let Ruby travel with him, due to still feeling guilty for Rose's death. The same would be the case for the Devil's Cord as well, that being that it would be mostly the same as it was in our timeline. David Tennant would no doubt act his socks off in Boom, just as much as Unshuti Gatwa did in our timeline. But then we come to the matter of 73 yards. Since it was pretty Doctor Light, due to Unshuti being busy filming other stuff at the time it was being filmed, we would have to change it a fair amount if Tennant had stayed on. As I said earlier, Tennant's schedule wouldn't have had such difficulties, as far as I know anyway, and so there would no longer be any need for the episodes to not feature the Doctor that much. What we could instead have is an episode solely focusing on Roger Ap Gwilliam's rise and then fall from power in 2046. I think the title of Albion would work for this episode. This would probably make the 2046 scenes in Empire of Death make more sense, as we would now be revisiting a location that we know the Doctor and Ruby had previously been to, rather than having the Doctor refer to an off-screen solo adventure. Dot and Bubble would also need to be pretty different, as obviously there could no longer be the same racist element with 14 being white. Perhaps it could be a commentary on the generational divide, with Lindy Pepperbean and the others refusing to listen to the Doctor because he looks a lot older than them. But I don't know if it would be quite as powerful and effective a message as the racism one was in our timeline. Rogue would still play out the exact same as it did in our timeline, and so would the majority of the two-part finale, The Legends of Ruby Sunday / Empire of Death, although I think it would be good if Donna were to return in that finale, so that she and 14 can spend some time having a chat about Rose's death, and for her to comfort him about it some more. But there would obviously be the matter of how 14 would regenerate into 15 to deal with. I think it would make sense if it had something to do with Sutekh. Perhaps Sutekh fires his I-beam fin at 14 just before he dies in the time vortex. This causes 14 to stagger back into the TARDIS and collapse to the floor. Ruby rushes over to his side and asks if he's alright. 14 shakes his head and manages to get back up with Ruby's help. He looks at his hands, which glow with that familiar regeneration energy. The Doctor decides to still take Ruby back to Unit HQ. Once he steps outside, Kate and the rest of her unit team can tell what's wrong. Donna and Mel rush over to the Doctor's side, with Ruby on the other. 14 makes his final goodbyes to them all, and then says his final words, Allons-y. Tennant's 14 would then regenerate into Unshuti's 15. The whole process would be the usual one for regeneration, with there being no bi-generation. I say this because I don't think it would work very well in this context, even if it's very likely that Russell would have still come up with the idea, really. This would obviously be the first we see of Unshuti, due to there being no bi-generation in this universe's Giggle. 15 would then need some time to recover due to some slight post-regenerative trauma, but he would have settled into his new body fairly quickly, so that he can then take Ruby to meet her biological mum, Louise, with units still being able to track Louise down through a DNA sample, and with her still being an ordinary woman. Ruby would then still leave the Doctor so that she could find out more about her biological parents and meet her biological father, William. And then things would play out more or less the same as they will do in our timeline. Joy to the World will now be Unshuti's first full episode, with Season 2, aka Series 15, acting as his first season. 15 would still meet Joy and then Belinda, and I'm sure Ruby would still factor into Season 2 in the same way that she will in our timeline. And that's kind of that for this scenario, really. Obviously, the bonds that 14 would have with Ruby would be very different to what 15 had with her. It would be much more of an almost father and daughter type of relationship, rather than the two of them being best mates. I mean, they'd still be best mates, but not quite in the same way, anyway. I say this because David Tennant would be older than Millie Gibson or Unshuti. Ruby would also help 14 to see the lighter side of things again, and to emotionally heal from not just Rose's death, but also everything else he'd been through. The Flux destroying the universe, seeing Gallifrey get destroyed again, the Timeless Child revelation, losing Amy, Rory, Clara and Bill, and having to say goodbye to Yaz. Whilst this scenario could have been really interesting to see play out, I'm kind of glad that it didn't. I would have liked to have seen 14 get more screen time, but I wouldn't want that to come at the cost of 15's amount. And obviously David Tennant already has a full era as 10, so him getting a bit closer to having 2 by staying on for a full season might not have been all that fair. Plus, it's hard to say whether him staying on would have been all that beneficial for new viewers. They might have got confused when they found out that David Tennant had already played the Doctor at one point, and yet the season they would be watching would be officially called Season 1, as if to mark a new start. So yeah, I think it's for the best that things worked out the way they did in our timeline, but this scenario was still pretty fascinating to think about for me. But anyway, so there's my take on what if David Tennant had stayed for Season 1 / Series 14. But what did you think? Did you like my take on it or not? And would you have done anything differently? Please let me know in the comments section below. Anyway, so thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. Please don't forget to press that subscribe button below, as well as press the bell icon at the side of it, so that you'll stay notified of when all my new videos come out. This channel currently has 2,318 subscribers as of time of writing and recording this video, but if we can get to 2,500 by the end of this year, then I will do a Q&A, where you can ask me whatever questions you want. Just keep them polite, please. Also, please rate and comment below your thoughts on all of this, and please feel free to donate to my Ko-fi page, link in the description, or send me a YouTube super thanks below if you want to, of course. And I now also have a What If Discord server, which you can join by clicking on the link in the pinned comment below, but only join if you want to. And I shall see you all in another video. So until next time, bye bye.